My name is Emily, and I'm 34 years old. I recently ended my marriage of 8 years, a significant chapter of my life. The grounds for our separation were indeed substantial, and here's the story. It all began when Edward and I met at a music concert. We were enjoying the night, lost in the rhythm and good spirits, and struck up a conversation that led to us exchanging contact information. After dating for 3 years, we felt ready to tie the knot here. Our marriage had its fair share of challenges, but we always found a way to work through them. We even managed to purchase a house together after 3 years. Although due to Edward's poor credit history, the mortgage indeed had to be solely under my name. Edward and I earned roughly the same, but Edward had a penchant for spending, often beyond his means. I spent an entire year monitoring his spending habits to help improve his credit rating. Despite these financial frictions, we maintained a stable relationship. However, my peace was disrupted when I received a notification about a credit card opening in my name, an event I hadn't initiated. Initially dismissing it as a scam, I didn't give it much thought until the warning resurfaced a couple of months later. This time, compelled by a persistent gut feeling that something was amiss, I decided to investigate. To my dismay, I discovered that my credit score had taken a hit. Coming from a family that placed a high value on financial literacy, maintaining a good credit score was something I took very seriously. The discovery of the credit discrepancy was a turning point in reassessing the trust and dynamics of our marriage. Growing up with a solid understanding of economics, thanks to my parents, I've always been adept at navigating various financial systems. This background taught me to manage my credit carefully, so witnessing my credit score suddenly plummet was alarming. I barely used my credit card, and when I did, I made sure to clear the balance within a few days. The decline in my score led me to wonder if I had mistakenly provided my card details on a questionable website or to someone untrustworthy, but nothing came to mind. Then a realization hit me. Lately, Edward had been acquiring quite a few upscale items, yet there hadn't been any increase in his salary, nor had he mentioned any additional incentives. This discrepancy made me suspect that he might be involved in the mishaps with my credit. Despite our mutual decision to maintain financial independence, only discussing our finances when it came to bonuses or overtime to manage shared expenses, Edward's recent purchases seemed out of place, and he hadn't mentioned having extra money. Determined to address the issue tactfully, I decided to inquire subtly about his spending. I commented on his new watch, asking, "That's a nice watch you've got there, Edward. Where did you get it from?" He replied somewhat defensively, "Just an impulse purchase," noticing the luxurious look of the watch. I probed further, "That looks quite expensive. Did you use your credit card for this impulse buy?" Edward's reaction was one of irritation. "Are you trying to monitor and control my spending?" "I thought we agreed not to interfere with each other's finances," he said. I reassured him I'm not trying to control anything. You know I'm cautious about spending money we don't have. I don't want us to face financial difficulties. Edward accused me of overstepping. "You're constantly looking over my finances. The one time I purchase without notifying you, it becomes a big deal," he argued. This exchange highlighted the growing financial distrust between us, hinting at deeper issues in our marriage. I never intended to control how Edward spent his money. My concern was purely about how his spending could impact us negatively. If his purchases hindered our ability to pay off our loans more quickly, then it was a concern. Edward accused me of overstepping simply because I had a background in finance, arguing that it didn't give me the right to manage everything. He claimed that my knowledge was the reason we were living comfortably on average salaries. Yet he wanted to drop the subject, exhausted by what he perceived as my judgmental attitude. Edward's defensiveness only deepened my suspicions that he was the reason my credit score had plummeted. After our conversation, he became distant and cold, hardly speaking to me. Whenever I tried to reconnect and discuss our issues, he shut down, labeling me as mean and controlling. This escalated to the point where he involved his mother, who bombarded me with messages accusing me of financially abusing her son, an entirely baseless claim. I had always been aware of Edward's poor financial habits. When we married, his credit score was abysmal due to impulse spending. Despite my efforts to educate him on responsible financial practices, it seemed he never fully grasped the consequences of his spending. This misunderstanding led him to view me as the antagonist, though all I wanted was to prevent the financial ruin I'd seen tearing apart the marriages of friends and family. Perhaps I was overly cautious, but given Edward's history, I felt my vigilance was justified. As the tension at home grew unbearable, I sought refuge at my best friend's house for a brief respite. I informed Edward, but he showed little reaction. Meanwhile, over 3 weeks after our argument, Edward continued to accumulate more luxurious items, strategically placing them around our home as if to provoke a reaction. This display only reinforced the growing rift between us, making our shared space increasingly stifling. As Edward continued to display his new purchases around the house, it wasn't these provocations that upset me, but the sharp decline in my credit score that truly infuriated me. Needing a break, I decided to visit my best friend, Catherine. It had been a while since we last caught up, and she greeted me with open arms. We went out for lunch, and it was over this meal that I finally opened up about the struggles at home. "So how are things with Edward?" Catherine asked, noticing my unease. "Not great, actually," I admitted. "He's been quite confrontational. He's not being physically aggressive, but he accuses me of financially abusing him." "What do you mean? Can you explain a bit more?" she probed. "Well, Edward's been splurging on luxury items like a new gaming set, fancy watches, and other gadgets. I'm pretty sure it's not the money he's spending." "Is someone lending him money?" Catherine wondered. "I don't know, but what I do know is that my credit score has plummeted because several credit cards have been opened in my name without my consent." "That sounds serious, Emily. Are you suggesting Edward might be behind this?" I hate to think it, but his defensive reaction when I casually asked him about his recent purchases was a red flag. I didn't even bring up the credit cards. "You need to gather some proof," Catherine advised. "I know, but it feels wrong to invade his privacy," I confessed. "At this point, who cares? He didn't consider your privacy or credit when he possibly took those actions," she pointed out pragmatically. "Let's go to your house tomorrow while Edward is at work. We'll look for any evidence, okay?" I agreed, though the thought made me uneasy. Look, Emily, fraud is fraud. As terrible as it may sound, if Edward is betraying your trust like this, you need to protect yourself, Catherine asserted. "You're right. I need to think about my well-being this time," I acknowledged, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Catherine and I spent the rest of the day binge-watching our favorite shows and making plans for the next day. We both took the day off work. Despite the nerves about what we might discover, I knew this was something I had to do, not just for my peace of mind, but for my financial security. I loved Edward dearly, but I also needed to safeguard my future, I thought, despite my deep affection for him. The following day, Catherine and I rose early, timing our departure to ensure Edward had left for work. Upon arriving, we swiftly entered and made our way to the bedroom. We rummaged through Edward's nightstand and wardrobe, but found nothing incriminating. A part of me felt relieved. I was still holding on to hope that Edward wasn't involved in the misuse of my credit. We then proceeded to his home office. I checked his desk while Catherine explored his computer. Luckily, I was familiar with his passwords, and although he had changed his computer's password recently, I managed to guess it. His search history was wiped clean, and the desk drawers revealed only mundane documents, except for one. The bottom drawer felt unusually hollow, hinting at a possible hidden compartment. After some probing, Catherine and I discovered a false bottom in the drawer, revealing 2 credit cards issued in my name. I quickly took photos as evidence. The discovery ignited a fury within me. I thought, countering Edward's accusations by revealing his duplicity. Determined to confront this betrayal, I planned to figure out the best course of action. Swiftly, Catherine and I carefully returned everything to its original place before leaving. The drive back to her house was quiet, filled with mixed emotions of anger and hurt. Catherine checked on me frequently, offering her support. By the time we reached her place, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. The sense of betrayal overwhelmed me. Seeking guidance, I decided to FaceTime my parents, who always knew how to handle difficult situations with their wide network of friends and connections. "Hey, sweetie, how are you?" "It's been a while," my mom greeted cheerfully. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." "I'm doing okay, I guess," I managed to respond, trying to mask my turmoil. "You guess. What's going on?" My dad inquired, concerned. "What did he do?" "Do you need us to come down there?" My mom asked, ready to jump into action. "No, I want to handle this myself," I insisted, determined to confront the issue on my terms and teach Edward a lesson about trust and respect in our relationship. As I confided in my parents over the phone, the weight of the situation began to unfold. I just found out that Edward has been opening multiple credit cards in my name and maxed them out. I explained what. "Are you sure it was him?" they asked in shock. "Yeah, I wasn't certain until today." Catherine and I went back to my house after an argument with Edward, and I found the credit cards in his office. I said, the frustration evident in my voice, "That's identity theft, sweetie." "You need to report it," my mom insisted firmly. "It doesn't matter that he's your husband. The law sees this just as seriously." I know, that's the plan. It all just feels so overwhelming, though, I admitted, feeling the emotional toll of it all. "Don't worry about a thing," my dad reassured me. "We have a friend who's a financial lawyer, and she will take care of everything for you." "That would mean the world to me," I replied, a wave of relief washing over me. "I'll have her contact you immediately. She'll help you fix your credit score right away," he promised. "Thanks a lot, you guys. Also, I need to ask, do you think I should continue being in a relationship with Edward?" I asked hesitantly, already knowing the answer in my heart. "No, honey, I think you should start the process to file for a divorce immediately," my mom responded without hesitation. "That's my girl. Let us know if you need absolutely anything," my dad added, showing unwavering support. "Yes, sweetie, we're just one phone call and one flight away from you," my mom chimed in. Their unconditional support was comforting. I had feared they might judge me and perhaps think less of me for not noticing sooner, but instead they treated my situation with immense care and concern, which made me feel incredibly relieved. True to his promise, my dad arranged for their lawyer friend to contact me. She was incredibly helpful, guiding me through the legal actions necessary to clear my name and hold Edward accountable for his actions. She assured me everything would be sorted out within a week to 12 days. For the first time in a while, I felt a glimmer of hope. After the call, Catherine and I spent some time relaxing, trying to take our minds off everything. During this time, Edward neither called nor texted to check on me. This indifference hurt more than I expected. That night, as I lay in bed, my resolve strengthened. I decided to file for a divorce the next day. The following day, with the help of my parents, I connected with a reputable divorce lawyer. Despite my worries that Edward might contest the divorce, which seemed illogical given his actions, I started the filing process. My heart ached with the realization of the end of what I had once hoped would be a lifelong partnership. Returning home from Catherine felt inevitable. Despite her urging me to stay longer, I needed to confront Edward, not to accuse him, but to understand his perspective once more, even though I already knew the extent of his deceit. When I entered the living room, Edward was lounging on the couch, absorbed in the TV. He looked up, clearly surprised to see me. "Oh, wow, you're back early. Didn't want me around?" I sighed, weary from the events. "I didn't come back to fight, Edward. I just walked in. Can we have a calm conversation for once?" His response was defensive. "How can we not fight? Since you left, I haven't heard a single apology from you. Why should I apologize when you took everything the wrong way? I was just asking how you managed those purchases, which you took as a direct attack." Feeling the frustration build, I replied, "Edward, I've said it countless times. My questions were out of concern for our financial health. If you took that personally, I can't help your insecurities." "Well, fine, according to you, I can do no wrong," he retorted sarcastically. "I just wanted to talk things out properly. That's why I came back." "Can we discuss this without making me out to be the villain?" I asked, hoping for a breakthrough. "How can I not feel vilified when you constantly criticize my spending habits?" Edward argued. "You don't know how many things I've wanted to buy over the years, but didn't because I was too scared." "Edward, let me be clear," I said firmly. "I never stopped you from spending or splurging. My only condition was that major purchases should be infrequent, but smaller ones could happen anytime. I was only stricter when we were working on fixing your credit." "That's not true. You've been like this since the beginning," he accused. At that moment, I realized no amount of discussion could undo the misunderstanding and hurt between us. "Okay, well then I'm sorry if I ever made you feel constrained. That was never my intention," I offered, feeling the finality of our situation creeping in. The conversation at home did little to bridge the growing chasm between us. It became clear that my visit wasn't going to restore any harmony, but instead highlighted the deep-seated issues that had been festering under the surface of our marriage. As difficult as it was, it reaffirmed my decision that moving forward with the divorce was the right choice. The way Edward tried to portray himself as the victim only fueled my frustration. After our conversation, it felt like a fog had lifted from my mind. I had held a faint hope that Edward might admit his wrongdoings and that we could somehow reconcile, but it became evident that wasn't going to happen. Leaving him in the living room, I retreated to the bedroom and immediately changed all my passwords. Edward needed to remain unaware of my next steps, particularly concerning the legal and financial actions I was about to take. The following days passed with me either working or spending time at Catherine's house, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then it finally happened. I received mail from my bank. The letter informed me that all my credit cards had been canceled, and since it was my husband who had committed the fraud, the outstanding amount would be charged to his account at the same bank. This news brought me an unexpected sense of relief. Seizing the moment, I decided it was time to file for divorce. There was no better time to act, especially with Edward financially and emotionally vulnerable. That evening, Edward returned home looking visibly unsettled, pacing back and forth in the living room. I suspected the reason for his distress, but wanted to hear him explain it. "What's wrong, Edward? You look so anxious," I asked. "It's nothing. Why do you care anyway?" he snapped, avoiding my gaze. It's something. Just tell me what's going on, I pressed, needing him to verbalize his troubles. Fine, I just got a call from the bank. They told me I owe them $50,000, he confessed, his voice tinged with panic. $50,000? Why on earth would you owe them that much? I probed, although I had a good idea why. I don't know, he muttered, looking down. Don't lie to me, Edward. Is this about all the new stuff you've been buying? But your credit card maxes out at $300,000. Did you take out another credit card? I demanded. Not really, he hesitated, then added, Look, I was angry at you, and with my life in general, so I did something stupid. The admission was both a confession and a capitulation. Edward's recklessness had caught up with him, and now faced with the repercussions, he was finally beginning to grasp the severity of his actions. This was the turning point I had been waiting for, a moment of clarity that confirmed my decision to move forward with the divorce was not only necessary but urgent. When Edward confessed to taking out credit cards in my name, I was clear and firm in my response. I reported you to the bank because what you did is a crime, Edward. It's called identity theft, I explained, seeing his confusion. You're fortunate that I only went this far and that the bank was lenient enough to transfer the debt to your account, I continued. Edward looked incredulous. You know I can't afford to pay that off. I was just starting to stabilize financially. You knew it was wrong to steal, yet you did it anyway. These are the consequences of your actions, I said firmly. You are a horrible person, he accused, his voice filled with desperation. No, Edward. Throughout this, it's been your actions that have forced us to this point. You've pushed me to the point where I want a divorce, I said, handing him the divorce papers. Here, sign these. You're leaving me too. How cruel can you be? What happened to till death do us part? He protested. That vow was nullified the moment you chose to steal from me and manipulate my feelings, I countered. I want you out of the house within a month. After that confrontation, I left the house with my dignity intact, feeling relieved yet somber about the necessary end of our marriage. Edward tried to reach out several times, but I ignored all his calls and messages, choosing to stay with Catherine to avoid any further distress. Thankfully, Edward signed the divorce papers without causing further issues and moved out soon after. I later learned that Edward was couch surfing at friends' places because his damaged credit score prevented him from renting his apartment. Even his relationship with his mother deteriorated when she called to berate me for divorcing her son. At his lowest point, I calmly explained the situation, revealing the depth of Edward's deceit, which she had been unaware of. Understandably, she became furious with him and cut off communication. Now free from Edward's negativity, I feel a profound sense of relief and optimism about my future. Though I occasionally reminisce about the good times we shared, the overshadowing bad memories affirm my decision. I'm now ready to move on to bigger and better things, embracing a future filled with positivity and new beginnings. Cheers to turning a painful ending into a hopeful new chapter.
I have proof she's cheating, Amanda, my sister-in-law, said as she dramatically pulled out a manila envelope. Everyone gathered around the dining table, gasping as she spread out photos on the shiny wooden surface. I sat quietly at the end of the table, sipping my water and watching. My name is Sophie Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I was watching my husband's family try to ruin my 8-year marriage. The irony was hard to miss. The photos showed me meeting different men over the past month, having lunch, coffee, and even dinner. In each picture, I looked like I was having deep conversations, smiling, leaning in, and sometimes touching their hands. To someone who didn't know better, it looked bad. Look at these, Amanda said with excitement. While David has been working hard, she's been running around town with other men. She turned to my husband, who sat still next to his mistress, Jessica. Now you don't have to feel guilty about Jessica, and you definitely don't have to give Sophie anything in the divorce. David didn't look at me. His mother, Eleanor, picked up a photo with shaky hands. Sophie, how could you? We welcomed you into our family. A long time ago, her disappointment would have hurt me. Now, I just smiled inside. Well? Amanda pushed. What do you have to say for yourself? I calmly put my glass down and looked around the table. David still wouldn't meet my eyes. His parents looked upset, though I noticed his father, George, seemed more uncomfortable than angry. Amanda stood tall, one hand on her hip, pointing at the photos. Nice pictures, I said. The lighting is great. You must have paid your private investigator a lot. Amanda's smirk faded. She hadn't expected that. That's all you have to say, she snapped. You're not even going to deny it? I reached into my purse, everyone tense, waiting for tears or a confession. Instead, I pulled out my tablet and set it on the table. Why would I deny it? I asked, my voice calm. Those men are all divorce lawyers. Silence. What? Amanda stuttered. I pointed at the photos. That's James Morrison, the best family lawyer in the city. This is Michael Chen. His firm specializes in cases involving cheating. And this dinner? That's William Parker. He's great at handling cases where people try to hide money before a divorce. Amanda's face turned pale. David suddenly found his water glass very interesting. You see, I continued, when I found out about David and Jessica 3 months ago, I decided to prepare. You're lying, Amanda said, but she didn't sound sure. I turned on my tablet. That's the great thing about legal meetings. There's always proof. I pulled up emails and signed agreements. But that's not even the most interesting part, I said, looking at David. Eleanor's voice shook. What do you mean? Well, I said, during one meeting, I learned something about recent property transfers in this family. Lots of money and houses changing hands. New companies being formed. I let my words sink in. George shifted uncomfortably. David frowned. Dad, is that why you had me sign those papers last month? You said it was just routine family business. I watched as realization hit him. His family wasn't just helping him cheat. They were hiding money before the divorce. David, sweetheart, we were just protecting you, Eleanor started. I cut her off. Actually, you were committing fraud. I smiled. And my lawyers have proof. Amanda sank into a chair, defeated. You knew, she whispered. You knew this whole time. I nodded and grabbed my things. Next time you hire a private investigator, make sure they're not working for both sides. I stood up, fixing my dress. Oh, and those lawyers. I officially hired the best one yesterday. I walked to the door, then turned back. David, your lawyer will get the paperwork tomorrow. You might want to read it carefully, especially the part about fraud. And Amanda. I met her shocked eyes. Thanks for the photos. They'll make great evidence. My heels clicked on the floor as I left. In my car, I finally allowed myself a small smile. They thought they had trapped me. They had no idea what was coming. The next few days were full of chaos. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from David's family. Some were threats, others were tearful pleas. Amanda, especially, kept switching between anger and panic. Her texts became more desperate. You can't do this to us, her latest message read. We're family. I thought about that word, family. They hadn't treated me like family when they were planning to leave me with nothing. I ignored her message and focused on my preparations. James Morrison's law office was exactly what I expected: shiny wood, leather chairs, and an air of power. I sat in the conference room, reviewing documents while waiting. Right on time, David walked in with his lawyer, followed by Eleanor and George. Amanda was last, trying to look confident but failing. Mrs. Bennet, James greeted me with a nod. Shall we begin? I watched David's face as James laid out the evidence. He turned pale when we presented our timeline. Every shady property transfer, every new company, every attempt to hide money. Eleanor grabbed his arm when James mentioned possible criminal charges. This is nonsense, David's lawyer said. These were just normal family business decisions. Are they? I asked, sliding a stack of papers forward. Because these documents show my name was removed from family business assets 3 months ago, right when David started his affair. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? George shifted in his seat. He was always the weakest link, too worried about his social reputation to risk the scandal. Now, James continued, we're willing to be reasonable. Mrs. Bennet helped build this family's success. She only wants her fair share. Fair share? Amanda snapped. She's trying to ruin us. I turned to her, calm as ever. No, Amanda. I'm protecting what I helped create. Would you like me to play the recording of you and David discussing how to keep that gold digger from getting anything? Her face went white. David's head snapped up. You recorded us? No, I replied calmly. Your mistress did. Jessica was quite helpful once I showed her proof that you were planning to leave her too, once you'd secured your assets. The room erupted into chaos. Eleanor was crying, George was demanding to speak to his personal lawyer, and Amanda was screaming about betrayal. Through it all, I sat quietly, watching my husband realize just how thoroughly he'd been outplayed. Here's what's going to happen. James spoke over the noise, his voice commanding silence. We have documented evidence of attempted fraud. We can pursue this criminally, or we can reach a reasonable settlement today. Your choice. David's lawyer requested a moment with his client. As they huddled in the corner, I could see the fight leaving David's body. He'd always been arrogant, convinced of his own cleverness, but now he looked deflated. We'll agree to fair terms, his lawyer finally announced. Excellent, James smiled. Mrs. Bennet has already outlined her requirements. He distributed copies of the settlement proposal. I'd been thorough but not vindictive. I wanted what I'd helped build, nothing more. This is outrageous, Eleanor exclaimed, but George placed a restraining hand on her arm. Sign it, David, he said quietly. We can't risk this getting out. As David picked up the pen, Amanda made one last desperate attempt. Wait. Those photos. They were in public places. She was flaunting these meetings. I couldn't help but laugh softly. Of course they were public. I wanted you to see them. Every lunch, every coffee meeting. I knew you were having me followed. I just made sure your investigator got exactly what I wanted you to see. The realization that they'd been played at their own game finally silenced them. One by one, the documents were signed. As James gathered the paperwork, I stood to leave. Sophie, David called out, his voice strange. When did you get so calculating? I paused at the door. I learned from the best, didn't I? Family taught me. The irony of my words wasn't lost on anyone in the room. As I walked out of the office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about winning. It's about showing them they underestimated you all along. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and clean. My phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. It's done. Thank you for showing me the truth about him. I smiled, remembering how easy it had been to turn David's mistress into my ally once I showed her proof of his pattern of betrayal. She'd been more than happy to share the recordings of his promises to her. His plans to discard her just like me once he'd secured his wealth. Sometimes the strongest alliances come from unexpected places. As I drove home, I thought about family, not the one that had betrayed me, but the one I would build for myself now, on my own terms. 6 months after the settlement, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping coffee and watching the city wake up. The morning sun cast long shadows across my recently furnished living room, highlighting the fresh start I'd made for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Of all people. We'd maintained an unlikely friendship after everything. You won't believe who I just saw at Riverside Cafe, Amanda. She actually tried to pretend she didn't see me. I smiled, remembering how thoroughly the family had unraveled after our meeting. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect family business had cracked under the weight of their own schemes. George had retired early, claiming health issues, but everyone knew it was to avoid the whispers at his precious country club. Eleanor had thrown herself into charity work, desperately trying to maintain their social standing. Amanda, perhaps, had faced the harshest reality check. Her role in the attempted fraud had cost her her position in the family company. Last I heard, she was working as a junior accountant at a small firm, a significant step down from her former executive title. My phone rang. It was James Morrison. Sophie, he greeted warmly, just wanted to let you know the last of the transfers are complete. Everything's officially settled. Thank you, James, for everything. You know, he said, his tone thoughtful, in all my years practicing law, I've never seen someone handle betrayal with such strategic precision. Have you ever considered a career change? I laughed, but his words stuck with me. In outmaneuvering David and his family, I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed: strength, cunning, and an ability to see 3 moves ahead. Later that afternoon, I met Laura, my closest friend, for lunch. She'd been my rock throughout everything, one of the few people who knew the whole story from the beginning. "Have you heard?" she asked, sliding into her seat. "David's been demoted. Apparently, some of his business decisions during the whole divorce drama didn't sit well with the board." I shook my head. I'm not surprised. He always did think he was smarter than everyone else. Speaking of smart, Laura leaned forward. "How's the new venture going?" After the settlement, I used part of my settlement to start a consulting firm, helping other women navigate complex divorces and financial disputes. It felt right, using my experience to help others protect themselves. "We're expanding," I said, unable to hide my pride. "Opened a second office last week." "Look at you," Laura grinned. "From being blindsided by your husband's betrayal to running your own empire. Who would have thought?" I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, trusting, naive, willing to believe in family loyalty above all else. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, but not bitter. If anything, I was grateful for the lessons learned. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Eleanor. "I miss you. The family isn't the same without you." I archived it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. That evening, as I reviewed applications for my firm's mentorship program, I reflected on how life had changed. The family that had tried to destroy me had inadvertently set me free. Their attempts to leave me with nothing had pushed me to become something more than I'd ever imagined. The doorbell rang. It was Jessica with a bottle of wine. Our monthly catch-up sessions had become a tradition of sorts. "To Karma." She raised her glass, settling onto my couch. "David's dating someone new, by the way. Poor girl has no idea what she's getting into." "Should we warn her?" I asked, half joking. Jessica laughed. "Something tells me she'll figure it out on her own. Besides, I hear she's quite clever with computers. Maybe she'll catch on faster than we did." We shared a knowing look. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about moving forward while watching karma do its work. As the sun set over the city, casting an orange glow through my windows, I felt at peace. The family that had tried to write me off as naive had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. My new life wasn't built on revenge or bitterness. It was built on wisdom, strength, and the knowledge that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best beginnings. I raised my glass to the setting sun, silently thanking them for teaching me exactly who I could become. The story of how my husband's family tried to destroy me had become the catalyst for my greatest transformation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. "You foolish girl," Margaret, my mother-in-law, sneered, waving the papers in my face. "Did you really think Anthony would share anything with you? You signed everything away." I sat at my kitchen table, calm, watching her ruin the edges of what she thought was my defeat. Her fancy clothes and perfect hair couldn't hide the smugness on her face. "You should read those papers again," I said quietly, sipping my tea. "I'm Olivia, 34 years old, and my marriage was falling apart in the most predictable way. My husband, Anthony, had fallen for his 23-year-old secretary. Typical. But what wasn't typical was how I had prepared for this. Margaret expected me to cry, to beg. Instead, I was calm, even smiling. "These are the papers you signed last month," she insisted, pointing at my signature, "giving up all claims to Anthony's money and property. His lawyer made sure of it." I nodded. "Oh yes, Anthony's lawyer, the one you recommended. Mr. Peters, wasn't it?" Margaret's smugness wavered. For the first time, she looked unsure. "What are you saying?" she snapped. "Mr. Peters is one of the best. He's handled our family's legal matters for years." "Oh, I know," I said, getting up to refill my cup. "Just like I know about the other papers I signed that day. 3 months ago, I noticed the signs, late nights, secret calls, sudden interest in his looks. But what really gave it away was Margaret. She visited more often, always suggesting I protect the family assets. "You should keep your inheritance separate," she'd say. "Let Anthony handle investments." She always had a story about some poor wife who lost everything in a divorce. I played along, pretending to be the naive small-town girl she thought I was. What she never realized was that I had been watching and learning for 8 years. Margaret's confidence cracked. "What other papers?" she asked, nervous now. I walked to my home office, with Margaret following behind. From my drawer, I pulled out a thick envelope. "You see, when I saw those documents, I had my own lawyer check them. And she found something interesting. Anthony had been hiding money." Margaret's face turned pale. "You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted. "I'm his wife. And when my lawyer saw the hidden accounts, the property transfers to your name, she told me to sign your papers, and mine too." I spread out the documents, 8 years of financial records, bank statements, property transfers, and most importantly, emails between Margaret and Anthony, plotting to leave me with nothing. "Did Anthony tell you about his offshore account?" I asked, "or did you help him set it up?" Margaret sank into the chair. "You're bluffing," she whispered. I smiled and held up a printout. "Passwords are usually something personal. Anthony always used your birthday. So sweet, right?" Her face drained of color as she saw her own words in black and white. Emails where she advised Anthony on hiding assets. "You really thought I'd sign away my rights without a backup plan?" I asked. "You taught me well how to protect family assets." Margaret reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. "These are copies. The originals, with my lawyer, along with recordings of all our talks about finances." A noise at the door made us turn. Anthony stood there flustered. Behind him, his secretary sat in the car, looking unsure. "Mom," he called, then froze when he saw the papers. "What's going on?" I smiled, gathering everything into the envelope. "Perfect timing. We were just talking about the documents you had me sign, and some other things you might want to hear." His confusion was almost funny. Like his mother, he thought he was smart. He never imagined the quiet girl he underestimated had been planning all along. I gestured toward the kitchen table. "Let's talk, all of us, about how this divorce is going to work." As I walked past a mirror, I caught my reflection. I looked exactly how Margaret always claimed I wasn't: strong, confident, and completely in control. This wasn't the ending I wanted for my marriage, but it was the one I prepared for. And as I laid out my terms, I knew one thing: Margaret would never call me unworthy again. The next morning, Anthony and Margaret sat across from me at our kitchen table, their faces a mix of anger and disbelief. My lawyer, Diana, spread out the documents between us, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to Margaret's barely contained rage. "This is blackmail," Margaret hissed, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled from running her hands through it repeatedly. "We'll fight this." Diana raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Henderson, I'd advise against using that term. Everything my client has gathered is perfectly legal documentation of financial fraud and attempted asset concealment. Would you like me to detail the potential criminal implications?" I watched Anthony shift uncomfortably in his seat. The confident businessman who planned to leave me with nothing now looked like a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. His young secretary was notably absent. Apparently, the prospect of a lengthy legal battle had dampened the romance. "Let's review what we discovered," Diana continued, her voice crisp. "Multiple unauthorized transfers from joint accounts, property titles altered without spousal consent, and documented evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud." She paused, looking directly at Margaret. "Including several recorded conversations where you explicitly advised your son on how to hide marital assets." "Those recordings were made without my knowledge," Margaret protested. "They're inadmissible." I couldn't help but smile. "Actually, they were made with your knowledge. Remember all those times you insisted we meet at the country club to discuss family matters?" "Single-party consent state, Margaret, and the club's security cameras caught every meeting." Anthony finally spoke up, his voice hoarse. "Olivia, please, we can work something out. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I interrupted, keeping my voice level. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. Systematically planning to leave your wife destitute while hiding assets with your mother's help. That's a choice, Anthony. A series of choices, actually." Diana pulled out another document. "Here's what my client is proposing. A fair division of assets, including the properties transferred to Mrs. Henderson's name in the past year. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges for fraud." Margaret's face turned an interesting shade of red. "Criminal charges? You wouldn't dare." The IRS is very interested in undisclosed offshore accounts, I said quietly, especially ones used to hide marital assets. Would you like to explain to them why you're listed as a signatory? The color drained from both their faces. Anthony looked at his mother in shock. Mom, you're on my offshore account? Margaret's composure finally cracked. I was protecting you. That girl never deserved you or our family's money. I had to make sure. That's enough. Anthony's voice was sharp. You told me this would be simple. That Olivia would never figure it out. That she'd just accept whatever we gave her. I sat back, watching mother and son turn on each other. 8 years of dealing with Margaret's subtle manipulations and condescension had taught me patience. Now I was watching her carefully constructed plan implode, taking her relationship with her son down with it. You know what the funny thing is? I said, drawing their attention back to me. I would have been fair in a divorce. If you'd just been honest, if you treated me with basic respect, we could have ended this marriage cleanly. Diana nodded, sliding another document forward. My client's terms are more than reasonable, considering the circumstances. I suggest you review them carefully. Anthony picked up the papers, his hands trembling slightly. As he read, his face grew increasingly pale. The house, my investment portfolio, the vacation property, all marital assets, Diana confirmed, and all subject to equitable division. Unless you prefer, we present our evidence of fraud to the court. Margaret reached for the papers, but I placed my hand firmly on them. You don't get a say in this anymore, Margaret. This is between me and my husband. Ex-husband, she snapped. Not yet. I corrected her. And until the divorce is final, every asset transfer you helped him make is subject to scrutiny. Shall we discuss the condo you put in your name last spring? The fight seemed to drain out of her. For the first time since I'd met her, Margaret looked her age, the carefully maintained facade of superiority crumbling. Anthony stared at the papers for a long moment before looking up at me. You planned this all along, didn't you? You knew what we were doing. I shook my head. No, Anthony, I just learned from watching your mother. She always said to protect myself, keep records, be prepared. I took her advice. I just don't think this is what she had in mind. Diana began gathering her documents. We'll need your decision by tomorrow. After that, we proceed with filing our evidence with the court. As they stood to leave, Margaret paused, turning to face me. I never thought you were good enough for him, she said, her voice bitter. I smiled. No, Margaret. You never thought I was smart enough. That was your mistake. 1 year later, I stood in my new apartment overlooking the city, a glass of wine in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, and life had taken an unexpected but wonderful turn. Diana called me that morning with the final update. The last property transfer is complete, she said, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Everything's settled exactly as we agreed. How's Margaret handling it? I couldn't help but ask. Diana chuckled. Last I heard, she's living in that condo she tried to hide. The one she insisted was bought with her personal funds. Turns out the paper trail led straight back to marital assets. She's lucky we didn't pursue fraud charges. I took a sip of my wine, remembering the day Anthony finally signed the divorce agreement. His young secretary had long since disappeared, probably realizing that a man who would conspire with his mother to defraud his wife wasn't the best choice for a future partner. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Emma, my sister, carrying takeout and wearing a broad grin. Ready to celebrate? She asked, setting the food on my kitchen counter. 1 year since Operation Takedown, the in-laws commence. I laughed, grabbing plates from the cabinet. You're enjoying this way too much. Are you kidding? Emma spread out the containers. My brilliant sister outsmarted the woman who spent 8 years trying to make her feel small. I'm going to enjoy this forever. She wasn't wrong. The past year had been transformative. After the divorce settlement, I used my portion of the assets to start my own interior design firm, something Margaret had always dismissed as my little hobby. Now, barely a year later, my business was thriving, with a growing list of high-end clients. Did you hear about Anthony? Emma asked, settling onto my couch with her plate. I shook my head. I try not to keep track. Well, you'd love this. He tried to reconcile with that secretary, but apparently she's engaged to someone else now. And get this, he's living in a rented apartment because his credit took a hit after all those suspicious transfers came to light. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but understanding. I never wanted to hurt him. I just wanted to be treated with respect. And that's why you won, Emma said firmly. You didn't act out of revenge. You protected yourself from people who were trying to destroy you. The sound of my phone interrupted us. It was a text from Anthony's sister, Kate. Unlike her mother and brother, Kate had reached out after the divorce, apologizing for not standing up to Margaret's behavior sooner. Mom's selling her jewelry, the text read. Says she needs the money since she can't access the family accounts anymore. Thought you'd want to know how karma works. I showed the text to Emma, who burst out laughing. The mighty Margaret selling her precious jewels. Oh, how the tables have turned. But I didn't feel like laughing. Instead, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman who had tried to make me feel worthless for 8 years was finally facing the consequences of her actions. You know what the best part is? I said, turning to Emma. I learned something valuable from Margaret after all. She always said a woman needs to protect herself, be independent, keep records. She just never thought I'd use those lessons against her. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Diana. Just heard from Anthony's new lawyer, she wrote. He's asking if you'll consider removing the financial disclosure requirement from the divorce agreement. Says it's making it hard for him to move forward. The requirement that Anthony disclose all financial transactions had been my idea, a safeguard against any future attempts to hide assets. It was completely legal and, given his past behavior, entirely reasonable. Tell him the agreement stands, I typed back. Some lessons need to be remembered. Emma raised her glass. To my sister, who turned the tables on the people who underestimated her. I clinked my glass against hers, but my toast was different. To lessons learned, strength found, and peace earned. Later that night, after Emma left, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Margaret's number, but I felt no urge to call back. Whatever crisis she was facing, it wasn't my problem anymore. I thought about the scared, insecure woman I'd been when I first married Anthony, so eager to please his family that I let them diminish me. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and finally free from the need for their approval. The next morning, I went to my office, where my design firm was buzzing with activity. My latest client, a wealthy divorcee, had specifically sought me out after hearing my story through the grapevine. I want someone who understands the importance of protecting yourself, she'd said during our first meeting. Someone who knows how to build something beautiful from a difficult situation. As I looked around at my growing business, my supportive sister, my true friends, I realized that Margaret had been right about one thing. I wasn't good enough for her son. I was too good for their whole toxic family. The last time I saw Margaret was at a charity event 6 months after the divorce. She was wearing noticeably less jewelry, her designer outfit from last season. She tried to avoid me, but I caught her eye across the room and smiled, raising my glass in a small salute. She turned away quickly, but not before I saw it. The recognition that she had created her own worst enemy. Every criticism, every manipulation, every attempt to make me feel inferior had only taught me how to be stronger. I did send her a thank you note, though. After all, she'd spent 8 years teaching me exactly how to protect myself from people like her. It seemed only right to acknowledge the lesson. Life has a funny way of teaching us what we need to know. Sometimes the people who try to tear us down only show us how high we can build ourselves up. Margaret had wanted to prove I wasn't good enough. Instead, she proved I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. And that was worth more than any property settlement could ever be.